The woman was running barefoot down a dark Los Angeles alley when the first patrol car rolled past without slowing. It was August 1988, just after midnight, and the street behind her was so still that her footsteps sounded like punches against the pavement. She was bleeding from a gunshot wound to the chest, and every breath cut through her like broken glass. She managed to wave down the next cruiser, collapsing against the passenger door while trying to force out the words that someone had tried to kill her. Her name was Anitra Washington, and she had just survived an attack by a man no one yet knew was one of the most persistent serial predators in California history. Detectives took her statement at the hospital. She said a man in an orange Ford Pinto had offered her a ride, then shot her at close range inside the car. She remembered his face, the interior, the smell of the upholstery, and the way he seemed calm even while she struggled. She was certain he believed she was dead when he pushed her onto the street. Her description was clear, detailed, and consistent, but the case stalled almost immediately. Gang violence was swallowing resources across South Los Angeles, and her attacker's trail went cold before it ever had a chance to warm. What no one realized was that this man had already been killing for years. The first known victims appeared in 1985, found in dumpsters, alleys, or on quiet streets where no witnesses came forward. All were women, most were black, many struggled with addiction or poverty, and all lived in neighborhoods routinely ignored by the broader city. The killings blended into the endless list of unsolved homicides that detectives in South Los Angeles carried like a second weight on their shoulders. By the early 1990s, the murders stopped, or at least they appeared to stop. Evidence suggested a long pause, an anomaly in the behavior of serial offenders. Without new cases, the old files drifted into storage rooms. Families were left to wonder why their daughters had been targeted, and investigators were left with no pattern they could prove. For almost a decade, silence buried the evidence. Then, in 2002, a woman's body was found in an abandoned alley, killed with the same kind of firearm used in several of the earlier cases. Investigators pulled the old files and saw the similarities instantly. Crime scene locations overlapped, victim profiles matched, and the wounds carried the same signature traits. The murders from the 1980s weren't isolated. They were part of a sequence that had simply paused before beginning again. The task force assigned to the cluster gave the unknown killer a temporary label based on geography, the South Side Slayer, a placeholder used for multiple overlapping offenders active in the region during the same era. But when ballistic results confirmed that several of the murders were tied to one specific gun and DNA evidence linked multiple victims to a single man, investigators realized they were dealing with only one predator for that subset of cases, someone who had vanished for years before returning. By 2007, the killings resumed again with the same brutal precision. DNA technology had improved, and the evidence held patterns that detectives couldn't ignore. They launched a focused investigation called the 800 Task Force, narrowing the search to thousands of men in the area, but the killer avoided typical detection. He didn't brag, didn't collect trophies, didn't contact police, and didn't leave messages. He lived quietly, blending into his neighborhood while the bodies of his victims told the story he never would. The break came through a new investigative tool, familial DNA. A partial match appeared in a state database when the son of a potential suspect was arrested on an unrelated charge. The match wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to suggest a biological relationship. Detectives built a profile around the father, noting his age, location, employment history, and access to vehicles matching survivor statements. They began watching him without letting him know. The man's name was Lonnie David Franklin Jr., a former sanitation worker and mechanic with no outward signs of the violence investigators believed he carried out. Detectives collected discarded utensils from a pizza shop, a cup from the trash, anything that might hold his DNA. When the results came back, the comparison was unquestionable. It matched DNA found on multiple victims stretching back decades. After years of uncertainty, the man behind the murders had a name. Franklin was arrested in July 2010. Detectives entered his modest home in South Los Angeles, expecting to find limited evidence. Instead, they discovered hundreds of photographs of women, some alive and posing, others appearing unconscious. They also found personal items belonging to several victims. The collection wasn't organized, but it showed a pattern of careful targeting that investigators had suspected but never proved. In interviews, Franklin revealed nothing. He denied everything, answered few questions, and showed no reaction when confronted with the evidence. Prosecutors built the case around DNA, ballistics, survivor testimony, and the timeline of his movements. They concluded that he had killed at least 10 women, though investigators believed the true number might be higher. Some photos showed women who were never identified. The trial began in 2016. Families of the victims filled the courtroom, many hearing full details of the investigative record for the first time. Prosecutors outlined Franklin's pattern: isolating women, attacking them in his car or home, and disposing of their bodies in areas where he believed police presence was minimal. Some jurors had never heard of crimes that spanned decades with long periods of silence in between. The trial lasted months, and Franklin remained expressionless nearly the entire time. The jury found him guilty on all counts. During sentencing, family members of the victims spoke directly to him. They talked about daughters who never came home, mothers who disappeared without explanation, and years of waiting for answers. Franklin offered none. He was sentenced to death, though the execution was never carried out. In March 2020, officers performing routine checks at San Quentin State Prison found him unresponsive in his cell. The autopsy reported natural causes. For the families who survived his decades of violence, the ending didn't feel like closure. Many still have questions about the years when the murders seemed to stop, about women in the photographs who were never identified, and about whether more victims exist beyond the official count. But the name that once terrorized their neighborhoods now stands documented in full. The Grim Sleeper's years of hunting in silence were over, and the story he never told was pieced together by the survivors, detectives, and families who refused to let his victims vanish into forgotten files. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.